Welcome once again to my weekly webcast. Last week I did not do a weekly webcast because the Senate was not in session, and I was in Iowa having meetings on Fridays, Saturdays, and I guess the previous Sunday I went to a Eagle Scout ceremony in Ackley, and then I had the good fortune of speaking at Britt, Iowa, at the cemetery, honoring fallen heroes that had served our country well to defend freedom. There was a great big turnout at Britt, and they had an avenue of flags. It was a very patriotic ceremony, and I hope I had the opportunity to add to that. I'm doing this webcast in my office, and I have the Store family from Pocahontas, Iowa, husband, wife, and two boys that are in Washington for studying government and touring Washington, D.C. And I welcome the Stores to my office and had a short discussion with them. And also I welcome anybody else to stop in, because part of people visiting my office is at 10:30 and 2:30 during the day we give tours of the Capitol for people that want to schedule those ahead of time. Now I turn, as I usually do, to my two questions that we answer on the webcast. And for those of you that send in other questions, we will answer those by mail. So here I start out with the first question from, the first question comes from Lorna of Tipton, Iowa. How can we stop illegal immigrants from receiving benefits that they haven't earned or contributed to? Well, the ideal way to do this is to make sure that our borders are secure, so people that come to our country can't enter our country illegally. That's the first line of defense. It's not a very sound line of defense, as we know so many people entering the country illegally, most of them from Mexico. Of course, you also want to remember that about half the people that are here illegally entered our country legally and overstayed their visa. And we ought to have a system to keep track of who overstays their visa, so we notify them that it's time to leave, so that they don't get lost in our society. But that would be the first line of defense. The second line of defense is to make sure that people that apply for jobs have their Social Security number verified by their employer. And I think the third line of defense would be to make sure that there's plenty of penalties, so that employers would not hire people who have entered the country illegally. It's not a very sound system, and obviously a lot of people come to this country illegally, and a lot of them get the benefits that you're talking about. They're not legally entitled to those benefits, but because of holes in our defense at entry to the country, obviously a few people get away with it, and maybe for all I know, and we never have sound numbers on this, millions of people may be getting away with getting benefits illegally. The second question comes from Heffley in DeWitt, Iowa. What happened to the Vitter Amendment on the financial reform bill? I voted for it. The Vitter Amendment would make sure that year in and year out we have a yearly audit of the by the Government Accountability Office of the Federal Reserve System. What we did finally get in the bill, though, was at least for the 1 year or the 2 years of the what we call the bailout, that we do have a Government Accountability Office audit of the Federal Reserve on that portion of their business. Now, I happen to believe in the Vitter Amendment, and I voted for it. We should have every year, year in and year out, the Government Accountability Office look at the Fed. The Fed is a part of the federal government. It is designated to have monetary policy, a very important public policy. And my belief is that the public's business ought to be public. And that's true of the Federal Reserve System as well as anything else in government, except maybe national security. And you don't want to tell your enemies your national security secrets. So that portion of our government's business legitimately ought to be secret. But beyond that, the public's business ought to be public, and that applies to the Federal Reserve as well. In closing, I want to tell you what's going on in the Senate this week. We have some votes on federal judges yesterday, maybe some coming up later on this week. We're going to start the tax extenders bill debate. That bill passed the House on Friday before Memorial Day. And then finally, we're going to have an effort to override the Environmental Protection Agency on their efforts to curb CO2. I think that they're doing something that the law does not allow them to do. The Supreme Court read that 1990 legislation and said EPA could do it. But if they do it, we're going to end up, since China does not have regulation of CO2, probably if we move ahead on our own without international agreement, we're probably going to end up getting rid of more manufacturing to China that's not regulated. And since CO2 does not respect political boundaries, it affects the environment all over the world. This should be done by international agreement and not by the United States through EPA acting on its own volition. See you next week for another webcast, and welcome your questions.